Hi everyone, and welcome to our next Cove live stream. It's a special one for us tonight. We've got a very special guest. Before we get to him though, I just want to remind you, if you do have questions, you can text them in. So we'll text your questions to the number you'll see on your screen, and we'll get your questions through and get them to Major General Jake Ellwood, who is our special guest this afternoon. An amazing career, 35 years of service to the Australian people, deployed to Kosovo, to Timor, to Iraq, to Afghanistan and back to Timor, was on bushfire and flood assist, and most recently he took over that massive job of State Recovery Officer from the Queensland flood. So he has a wealth of experience, and tonight we're going to tap into it and get some lessons to take away. So, Sir, welcome. Thanks for being part of the Cove live stream.
Thanks very much, Mark. Great to be here.
So, I want to start at the very start and go back with you. What initially attracted you to a career in Army?
Well, the idea of service has always been strong in our family, and particularly my father. So he was in the Merchant Navy in the Second World War. In fact, he went from an orphanage at age 14, went to sea in the North Atlantic during World War II, which is a pretty dangerous place to be. And then he served in the Malayan emergency, and then also became officer in charge of Macquarie Island for 2 full-year stints. So the idea of service to me was very strong for nation. And then as time went on, my mum actually passed an Army Reserve recruiting station. And I was 16 and she thought, well, you should join the reserve. I don't think she'd quite connected the fact that it was actually the Army. And so on my 17th birthday, I joined the Army Reserve while still at school, and I loved it so much that to me, I just wanted to keep serving, and I haven't looked back.
What was that initial period like? What were your first impressions?
Look, you know, as a young man starting off in the reserve, it seemed like a different world, and then I transferred to join the commandos in their reserve. I was in year 12 at the time. That was different again, but then of course going to Duntroon, you're in a whole new league and surrounded by such amazing people. To me, it was so different, but really wonderful, really tough. But it was great.
So was there someone who was a strong influence in those years? Was there someone who really had an impact on you?
So definitely my father. He was such a strong man. He started with nothing, and then built himself up, and then later on, so when I was around about 14 or 15, my mum had mental health issues for my whole childhood. She then left, and my father, you know, he stayed strong, and he supported me the whole way. And he could always laugh, he could always smile. And to me, that was such a wonderful attribute. And even when he was terminally ill, he stayed positive. And I thought, well, I want to be like that.
Good influence. Do you remember an early experience in your military career that really challenged you? And how did you get through it?
So look, I had many challenges as a young officer, but interestingly, I started off with a platoon sergeant who was a very he had been around the buoy a few times. He'd been demoted, re-promoted, and he knew exactly what right looked like. And I remember once I was told to give a set of orders for an ambush, and I left it to the last minute and I gave the orders. Afterwards, we were sitting on our packs and the sergeant said to me, "They were terrible orders." And I was furious. And we squabbled and I sort of turned back to back. And then, you know, I thought about it and I thought, you know what? You're right. They were terrible orders. And so I said, thank you for letting me know. And we became very close. He was a wonderful man. But I learned at that point that to accept, to hear and listen to and accept criticism is important, because you'll never get better if you just take what you think to be right. you will never improve. So it was a challenge. It was a challenge, but he was fantastic.
So much of your career has been spent in leadership and leading some pretty big projects. What have you learned about leadership? What are the key lessons you take away?
Well, to me, and I've said this to a few people. They used to ask the question at Duntroon, so what's the difference between a leader and a manager? And I never had a smart answer. And I don't know if my answer's smart now, but I have an answer. And that is that a manager will control. So a manager can send directions on email or on, you can text by phone. But that's controlling and that's managing. It's not leading. And I've learnt time and time again that the most important thing for a commander or leader is to be there, to be present, to be at the point of main effort. And I found it doesn't matter whether it's been, whether it was in Iraq or whether it was in Afghanistan or whether it was during the fires, to go out, to understand the situation, to talk to people, and to really hear, feel and see, and then communicate your views. It's important. And to me, that is the difference between a leader, a commander, and a manager.
You obviously learn so much as you go. How did your style of leadership evolve as you moved up through the ranks?
It's changed a lot, thank goodness. So look, I think when you're young, you start off very much, so there's authority and influence. And when I was younger, because you don't know much and you're really trying to cut your teeth, the thing you have is you have authority. So, if need be, I would lean back on I'm the boss, so I know you don't like the idea, but we're going to do it anyhow. And that worked for me for a time. But then you get to a point where authority is much less important and it becomes influence. The ability to get people on the same page and to get them to want to do things. Because when you're operating with friends and allies, when you're operating with people who aren't in the military, who you need, then you need to share the vision and you need to have a shared vision. And the only way you can do that is through influence and through discussion and communication. So I think that's the truth. Over time, I went from I wouldn't say I was authoritarian, but I certainly would lean back on that. But to today, if I look at my time with the floods, it was all about influence, not about authority at all. That wouldn't actually help.
You've worked your way up over your career through so many different ranks. If you could go back now and talk to a younger you in different ranks, what would you tell yourself?
It's a really good question. I think, I guess when you're younger, and I think many would relate to this, you do a course, you go on a course, and you're sure you're going to fail. That everything seems impossible. The idea of a combat fitness test or your promotion course, whatever it is, you feel ill-equipped and you feel like you will fail, and it's natural. But if I could tell my younger self that you're capable of much more than you think you are, and it's not just me, I think it's everyone, across the board, you're capable of much, much more than you know. You've just got to go for it. You've got to throw the doubts in the background and make it happen, and just keep at it until you make it happen. Anything's possible.
Really good advice. So how would you describe, in your words, today's Australian soldier?
Well, we have wonderful soldiers, and I've served with so many who they are our nation's treasure, and they are smart. They're committed. They've got great humour. They are able to bring in teams and influence in their own special way, we are blessed. And I've got to say, when you're working with Australian soldiers, it's the best thing you can do. They are very special. We're very lucky.
In your role as Queensland State Recovery Coordinator, a massive job at the time, you met with everyday people who'd been through some pretty heavy trauma. How did you deal with that, and how did you get those people on side and working with you?
It's a good question. I guess over a career, 5 deployments, and then the fires, and then the floods, I've seen a lot of chaos, and I've seen a lot of sadness, a lot of tragedy. And the thing is, you then over time learn how to deal with it. For me, the most important thing was to make sure that I didn't become a part of the problem. So you'll be in a bad situation, but you didn't cause that. So you've been asked to go on and do the best you can. And sometimes you'll feel like the best is not good enough, but it's your best, so it is good enough. And you can't take on it doesn't help people who are themselves trying to claw their way forward. It doesn't help if you're in the pit with them. You should be putting a hand out to help them through. And so, when I spoke to flood-affected families, I would say to them, I would give them advice, and indeed it's advice that seemed to work for me as well, is sometimes just one step, 1 foot forward is enough to then get the momentum to continue. It is always that first step is the hardest to take. But you need to give people time to process. I know, so when I've had a super bad day, and I've had some super bad days, that I go through a process. And I know that I'm not going to feel okay or great day 1. Day 2 is still going to be a bit ropey. But I know when day 3 comes and that sun rises, I'm back in it and back onto it. And so I think it's important for people to also, and I try to tell them there's nothing, that's unnatural about feeling stressed, about being upset, but it's in how we deal with that to move forward. But those families, some suffered greatly, but I think, again, giving them that hope is very important.
Good. Look, so I hope you don't mind, but I did go to a higher authority. I spoke to your wife, Nicole, and she says your greatest strength is your desire to help others, which I think is showing through. She says it's also your biggest weakness. How have you learned to manage that?
So it's a good question. I'm very appreciative of my wife for passing that on.
She does ask a good question.
She does. So I think that, there is nothing more important for me personally than helping people. And it doesn't matter if it's soldiers, sailors, aviators, or if it's people who are in a tight fix. You really do want to do the best you can to help them forward. It's also my biggest weakness because you never want to stop. You're never satisfied until you've gone as far as you can, and then even then sometimes you don't feel like you've done enough. But it comes back to the advice that I always gave to my kids is, your best is good enough. It's just sometimes it doesn't feel like it. That's all.
So many soldiers, defence personnel are being deployed to emergency civilian events at the moment. I'm talking about bushfires and floods, and there are obviously people out there in the floods at the moment. Having had as much experience as you have in that area, what do you tell people who are deployed out there at the moment or who are heading out to those flood zones?
So I think, it's very important to remember that you are helping fellow Australians in their time of need. And some won't realise it, some won't appreciate it. Particularly when you're wearing it, you don't see it. But having spoken to so many who have been affected, when they see the military, when they see the uniform, they get a sense of calm that everything is going to be okay. So their very presence will make a difference. And then by supporting, a person or a family, I've seen instances where, people have been clearly mentally broken. And I often think that it's the mental versus the physical or the material that is the hardest for people to overcome. When they have people in uniform there helping, it makes a big difference. And I've spoke to many community leaders who say the same thing. As soon as they see the uniform, they drive this sense that everything will be okay. So I would say to everyone going out there to remember, you make a difference. You make a difference by being there, and then by helping them, you make a bigger difference. And I think it's a privileged position because you're seeing people at their most vulnerable.
You've been so busy over so many years. How did you fit in family time? How do you manage the 2 kids, Nicole, all their needs as a family unit?
Well, maybe sometimes not really well. Military life exacts, it takes a lot from families, there's no doubt about it. But it also comes with much good. And for me, what I did is I made sure that when I was home, that I was present again. That, if I wanted to go fishing or I wanted to go for a run, I would generally do that before anyone had risen, so that I was back on the deck with the family, doing family things. And so I think being there and being involved is really important. And sometimes, people will say, boy, you've been away a lot. But the time I spent with family, our time was always quality. So while we may not have had the quantity, we always had great quality.
Let's fast forward 10, 15 years and you're sitting down with the grandkids. What's the one thing, the great moment that you want to share with them about your time in uniform?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I've got so many fond memories and there are just so many special moments. I think the thing I would actually say to them is, I look back at, say, a time like Afghanistan when I was Chief of Joint Operations there for a year, and it was tough. I mean, it was hard graft, 4 hours sleep a night on a good night, and we're dealing with some pretty tough stuff. And about 8 months into that, I'd lost my mum, and it was hard. I realised that I could keep going, and that you can keep going. So I would say to them that anything is possible. You've just got to keep moving forward. And so I think that to me it's a special learning and something that I would want to pass on to them.
There are people who tell me that your out of office has gone running. Where and how did this love affair with running start, and how big is it now?
Right. So running is always, running was very important when I was years. As I indicated before, when Mum left us and their home was very complicated. So I used to go running and it would make me feel better for whatever reason. I didn't know why, but it just did as a young kid. And then I sort of went to Duntroon, and bizarrely, I think I lost a little bit of fitness. But then I went to New Guinea and I contracted malaria. And so because of that condition, I knew I was going to be posted to tropics, I thought, well, what's the best way to get ready to sort of reacclimatise? I thought, well, I'll go back to running. It seemed to sort that problem. And anyhow, so since that time, I just never gave it away. And Rob D. Costello calls running a gift. And for me, it's been a gift. It's been my church. 5 deployments and the floods and fires and all these other things. It's the thing that I could always go back to that was routine, and after doing it, everything would just fall back into place. So, and it kept me healthy. So I have that passion, and so I guess that's where Run Army came about. I thought, well, 35 years, and I'm not unbroken. I mean, I think we've all got sort of ailments here and there. But I've been able to keep at it, and I think if we can give that gift to others, it's a great thing.
You mentioned Run Army. Tell me about your passion for running change and for Run Army. What do you want to see them become?
So for running change, I want to see soldiers who are either uncomfortable with running or scared of BFAs or coming back from injuries. I want them to go to that program if they're willing. It's 8 weeks. It's not a massive investment, but at the end of it, and we've had several hundred who have done it. It's changed their view, and many have actually grown a love for running, or at least a tolerance to it. And so I want to see that continue to help. But for Run Army, I want to see that become a national, large-scale event. I think and Brisbane will always be its home, but I'd love to see it go far and wide, and I think it will.
Your best experience in Army, what's it been?
Without a doubt, it's just being with Australian soldiers. There's nothing like it. Through thick and thin, you go through terrible times, yet you can laugh. And there's nothing more special than working with Australian soldiers. It's far and away been the highlight of my career, and I've cherished it.
For new soldiers and new officers coming through the Kapooka or Duntroon, what would you say to them? What's the one message after 35 years of experience that you want to say to people about today's Army?
I think today's Army is amazing. I look at the equipment, but equipment only takes you so far. But I look at the people. I look at the amazing, smart young people that we have who come through and join its ranks. You're part of this, amazing team, and I think to me that's super exciting. But I would again say to soldiers who are joining, officers who are going through, a bit like I would have told a young Jake, it would be that you can do more than you think. And so when you're told go on your subject course, and you go, well, I'm not ready. You are ready, and trust it. Trust yourself. Go for it. Yeah. Just do it.
So some great advice in there. Thank you very much. Fantastic chat. Really appreciate your honesty and your experience. I think it's so important to pass that on. So thank you. And it's almost time for your run, I guess, 20 Ks tonight, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Of course. Wouldn't surprise me. And don't forget, you've got to do the ads. Run Army is coming up in Brisbane, okay? 23rd of April. If you haven't signed up, jump on and do it now. And registration's free. There's a code there from the RSL. They're paying your entry. So that's the important ad. A couple more ads before we wrap up. If you haven't seen on the Cove website, the Australian Army Battle Honours Series, it is truly remarkable. The one that's been up there is the story of Gallipoli, which has been incredible. The brand new one up there is the story of Beersheba. And bottom line, we need to know these stories. They are beautifully told, beautifully animated. They are the best description of what went on in those two battles that you'll ever come across. And the brand new one on Beersheba is next level again. So if you haven't seen them, even sit your mates down, sit your family down and have a look at these things because they are so well done. Just a reminder to follow the Cove on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Keep in touch with what's happening. Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Major General Jake Ellwood. There were some great insights in there. And we will see you in the new year. Good night.